So next we have an interview with Nancy Bordier and Joe Firestone. And oh, here they are. I was going to declare you missing. I did not intend to really stand up here. So now we can go to our seats, please.
You gave us explicit instructions to sit in the front.
I completely forgot.
So I followed them.
Sit there? I completely forgot. It's, you know, my brain's a sieve now. So, but anyway, it's very exciting to introduce you all to two people that I think will really captivate your attention. They're able to express in incredible terms and exactly what many of us really experience in our daily lives dealing with the political and governmental system that we have. What I like about them also is that they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. They're actually trying to do something about what they think is going on with our systems. I'd like to welcome Nancy, thank you, the founder, and Joe Firestone, her co-founder of Reinvent Democracy Incorporated. It's going to be something to unpack the name of that. This interview has a very broad title. As you can see, Overcoming Systemic Voter Disempowerment with a System-Changing Technology. But to start, I think we need to make sure that we're all on the same page, and I'd like to ask the two of you to maybe share this answer. You can hand off to Joe at some point.
Or disagree with each other, as we usually do.
I'd like to just get a few examples of what you actually consider systemic voter disempowerment to be, maybe some points about the causes and consequences, just so that we know what exactly you mean by that.
Well, first of all, I should confess that Joe and I are both political scientists. And that means that we take a jaundiced view of just about everything that's going on in our political system right now. We also look at what's going on in our political system from a systemic point of view. So the marvelous people who've gotten up and pointed to a lot of these causes of what we call disempowerment, the way we look at it is that these causes of disempowerment are a system. They interact with each other, they reinforce each other. And that in order to re-empower our disempowered electorate, our disempowered voters, we're going to have to change the system itself. We can't pick on one or another of these causes of disempowerment. We have to have a systemic solution. And we have invented a systemic solution called the Interactive Voter Choice System, which you will probably hear more about than you ever hoped you would before this conference is over. When I talk to Susan on the phone, we have these 2-hour conversations, and we really get going. And I get on my soapbox, and then I say, but I promise I won't say that at the summit. And she says, well, go ahead and say it. So let me say some of the things that I've said to Susan, which is, in my more generous days, I think we have a not fully functioning democracy. In my less generous days, depending on what's going on Capitol Hill, I think it's a failing democracy. And then there are far too many days, like when they shut down the government, when I think it's a failed democracy. And for me, from where I sit, as also a citizen of another country looking at my beloved America where I was born, I really do, and we have come to the conclusion that we need a technology that's going to change the entire system, and it's going to do that within several election cycles. And the reason is because the causes of disempowerment are a system, they interact with each other, and we can't change it without changing the system. Okay, so let me just mention a few of them.
I was just going to say, maybe we should let Joe mention them. But
yes, we should.
Okay.
And I'm glad you interrupted.
And this was really good. If you have to follow closely with Nancy. I've learned that.
And stop her and make her go slow.
Well, it's nice because we can't stop. Yeah, Joe, can you squeeze a word in here?
Yes, I can squeeze in a few words. Okay, so we have the structure of our campaign finance laws, which of course have been undermined completely by the Supreme Court, in recent years. And so essentially we don't have any controls, or we have only very limited controls on financing of campaigns now, which allows a legalized corruption in our system. We also, of course, have the voter suppression, okay, which is going on continuously now. We also have the filibuster, which we've had for a very long time, but of late it's become extremely distorted because people don't even really have to get up and filibuster now. All they have to do is, for a single senator to register an objection, and we can't have a vote. Okay, and then also there are problems with our winner-take-all elections. Okay, as well, because that distorts the situation. In terms of if someone gets 51% of the vote, okay, somebody else 49% of the vote, then there's no representation for the party that's gotten the 49% vote. Okay, so then we have also the gerrymandering. Okay, that goes on, and that essentially bunches people who vote for a particular party or tries to do it, okay, into a particular district. Okay, and others into another district, so as to give a party that has control within a state a very large advantage, okay, in fairly close elections that are maybe 54 to 46 even, or 55 to 45. To break that, you really have to get up to large majorities in the states, okay, to gain control again once you have the gerrymandering, okay, that's occurred. And then at last, and I'm sure I've forgotten one of the factors here that Nancy
Don't give her a chance.
is able to fill in. But before I give you a chance, there's the final very important aspect of things, and that's that the people themselves have very little power to set the legislative agendas. In other words, in the end, all they can do is vote for candidates, but the framing of the issues and the setting of the agendas, both at the state and the federal level, they have almost no voice in. So people are basically ratifying their government. And because they're ratifying their government, there's an apathy problem. They're not getting to vote on what they want to vote on, okay? And so they mistrust their government. They know about all the rigging, okay, that's going on. And they have a lot of apathy, and so they stay out of elections, okay? And also not only do they stay out of elections, but they stay out of the parties. 40% of the voters don't identify with either of the major parties. And that's larger than the number of voters, okay, that identify with any one of the major parties. Back to you, Nancy.
I was going to just
Don't give her a
try
chance.
to summarize, but did we miss any of those key points?
No,
all right, so if I can try to summarize. When we take all these causes, these individual causes of voter disempowerment together, we get the systemic voter disempowerment that you're talking about.
That's right.
So voters, they can't really, they're not really determining who runs for office, who gets elected, and what laws are passed. Is that correct? Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
All right. Sounds a little bit like a system I'm sort of familiar with. I think we're on a roll here. We got a good start. But could we get down to maybe, and please comment further if I've missed anything, Nancy. I wanted to ask,
there is just one thing, if I could jump in, is that there are some recent studies, like the Gibbons and Page study, that says that basically Americans have very little impact on public policy. So, in a sense, if the citizens don't have any impact on public policy, it's not a democracy. It's a failed democracy. I'm sorry to say that. And that's the disconnect that we have to worry about when we look at this systemic disempowerment, because they can determine nothing except participate in symbolic elections in which they're basically transferring their sovereignty to people over whom they have no influence and cannot hold accountable at the polls. So when we look at the American political system and we talk about all the wonderful things that the U.S. Vote Foundation is doing and all of you are trying to do, voters are not going to go to the polls unless they have the power to run the government. And so if we don't give them the power to run the government using technology, they're not going to have the power and they're not going to turn out, because the lawmakers who benefit from the disempowerment of voters are not going to change the laws that is going to give them back the power. So the fact of the matter is, the key to getting turnout is giving voters power, and that's where the interactive voter choice system comes in.
Okay. Good. And I'm not sure if we want to touch on some more tangible impacts than that, or transition to this technology at this point, because I don't want to miss that. Okay. As I was saying before, Joe and Nancy have been working on something here, and you know, you've both written a lot about it as well. I definitely encourage you to read their material, their blogs. One of them that you wrote recently, Joe, a technological fix for failing democracies, and that leads me to my next question. I have several burning questions, but we'll get to this one first. And I'd really like you to tell us, either Joe or Nancy, you decide which, why you're so convinced that technology can actually, or is able to fix our failing or failed democracy.
Well, first of all, I think it's, well, it is a little arrogant, but the interactive voter choice system, which I invented while attending a presidential campaign event for Howard Dean in 2004, I had the idea. I didn't really follow through on the idea, but I've been thinking about it since then. And the fact of the matter is that we have to give voters the mechanism for determining what are the agendas of their elected representatives. And so what we've come up with, and it's not just Joe and myself, there are actually 25 of us who've been working on this, and we write all the papers together, so it doesn't matter whose signature is on it, but they're basically going in the same direction, is that with the interactive voter choice system, we will be able to create a web platform in which voters across the political spectrum can create a new layer, a new organizational layer, and inject it on top of the existing organizational layer of voting blocks, parties, and coalitions. The difference will be that the voters will create these voting blocks, they will create these parties, or they will take over existing parties. They will create electoral coalitions, they will run their own candidates, they will win, they will hold them accountable to enact their legislative agendas, and if they don't, they'll defeat them in the polls. How's that for a summary?
Sounds good.
Good.
Yeah. Anything to add on that specifically?
Yes, I'd like to add some of the technological aspect to that. One way to look at the IVCS is to view it as an alternative world, okay, of politics, which is using the platform of the web and many kinds of applications on the platform, but to allow people to self-organize from the bottom up within the platform environment, and to build their coalitions and their parties and their voting blocks by staying within the platform, which provides a comprehensive environment. It provides a communications environment. It provides cultures they create for themselves and which are insulated from the mass media, and which are also further insulated from the influence of big money. Important thing is that people can organize, self-organize inside of the environment without having to have access to big money. And so they can build hundreds of thousands and millions of voters into these blocks without having to have large sums of money from contributors. And that will free people to organize.
As Susan asked the question when we were speaking in preparation for the summit, well, how did this get started? Well, the fact is that you go into the reinventdemocracy.net website and you set your agenda using whatever means it is that you think are most conducive to what your priorities are. And then we have a technology that will connect you with voters who have similar priorities. And you can select voters who have certain kinds of priorities or across the board. But basically, and you can even disaggregate them down into election district level. But the fact is that it's a common platform. And so all of these voting blocks and political parties and coalitions will be interconnected. All of their members will be interconnected. So they can change their agendas. They can create common agendas. They can alter their agendas. They can create common slates of candidates. And they can be transpartisan. We argued about this on the car on the way in, but nonetheless. Joe thinks I'm more interested in transpartisanship than he is. But I truly believe if you look at all the polls, there's a lot of convergence of what voters want. But they get divided up into cages by political parties and special interest groups. And the fact is that the voters can come together and they can put together agendas and slates of candidates that are going to break the deadlocks in Congress, because fundamentally voters want things to work, like Manu was saying and the other people, at their level where their needs are. So the fact that they can get together and craft agendas that work for them where they live, and then elect representatives who are going to enact those agendas, and they can hold them accountable for doing that, it fundamentally reinvents the democracy.
And that is a beautiful finish to this personal interview. I want to invite the rest of, or the others that were part of this section to join us. You don't have to leave, and we can hear some more.